The moment Emma Sullivan stumbled through the doors of the only store in Timber Creek, she knew her life had reached its lowest point. It was 1878, and the unforgiving Montana Territory winter howled outside like a vengeful spirit, rattling the wooden walls of Pearson's general store. Her 4-year-old son Tommy lay sleeping on her shoulder, his small body radiating the only warmth she'd felt in days. "Please, Mr. Pearson," Emma whispered, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. "Just a little credit until I find work. Tommy hasn't eaten properly in 2 days." Oscar Pearson, a balding man with jowls that shook when he spoke, looked at her with a mixture of pity and business-hardened resolve. "Mrs. Sullivan, I've extended credit to half the town already. Times are tough for everyone." Emma clutched Tommy closer as her eyes darted around the store, taking in the shelves of canned goods and supplies that might as well have been on the moon for all her ability to afford them. The journey west had drained what little money her late husband had left her. John's fever had taken him just outside of Cheyenne, leaving Emma to bury him by the trail and continue westward with their son and dwindling hopes. "I can work," Emma said, straightening her back. "I can clean, cook, mend anything." Pearson sighed, his expression softening slightly. "I don't need help, Emma, but—" He reached beneath the counter and pulled out a sack of flour. "This one's got a tear in it, can't sell it full price. Put your boy down here while you think about what to do next." With gentle hands, Emma laid Tommy on the flour sack. The exhaustion of their journey had kept him asleep through their conversation. His small face, smudged with dirt, was peaceful in slumber, unaware of his mother's mounting panic. The bell above the store door jangled, and a gust of cold air swept in along with a tall figure in a well-worn duster. Emma didn't turn, too focused on stroking Tommy's hair and fighting back tears. "Afternoon, Mr. Pearson," came a deep voice, its tone carrying the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Ethan," Pearson nodded. "Thought you'd be up at the Olson place till tomorrow." "Got the fence mended quicker than expected. Storm's coming in hard, though." Emma felt his presence before she saw him, a looming shadow that fell across Tommy's sleeping form. She turned defensively, meeting the gaze of a man who stood at least 6 feet tall. His face was weathered from the sun, but his eyes were startlingly blue beneath the brim of his hat. A few days' worth of stubble covered his jaw, and there was trail dust on his duster, but his stance was steady and sure. "Madam," he said with a slight tip of his hat. Emma nodded mutely, trying to shift to block his view of Tommy on the flour sack, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. The man, Ethan, glanced down at Tommy, then back at her face, taking in her threadbare coat and the exhaustion etched into her features. He said nothing for a moment, just studied her with those piercing eyes. "That's Mrs. Sullivan," Pearson offered. "Just arrived from back east, her husband. He trailed off. Died outside Cheyenne," Emma finished flatly, not wanting pity. Ethan Orton nodded once, understanding passing across his features. He looked again at Tommy, sleeping soundly on the flour sack, his small chest rising and falling steadily. "He'll sleep in a bed tonight," he said, not as a question but as a statement of fact. Emma bristled. "We don't need charity, sir." "It's not charity, madam," Ethan replied evenly. "Martha Jenkins runs the boarding house at the edge of town. She's been looking for help since her daughter married and moved to Helena." He glanced at Pearson. "She makes the best apple pie this side of the Mississippi, and she's getting on in years. Could use younger hands around the place." Emma hesitated, suspicion warring with desperate need. "Why would you help us? You don't know us." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes, a memory, perhaps, or an old pain. "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing," he said simply. Then, with a slight smile that softened his rugged features, "Besides, No child should sleep on a flour sack when there's a proper bed to be had. A strange warmth bloomed in Emma's chest, the first spark of hope she'd felt in months. "I don't Mrs. Jenkins pays fair," Ethan continued, "and there's a small room off the kitchen that would fit you and your boy just fine." "I can arrange an introduction," Pearson chimed in. "Martha comes in every Thursday for supplies." "Today's Tuesday," Emma said weakly, the reality of 2 more nights with nowhere to go settling like a stone in her stomach. Ethan glanced outside at the darkening sky. "Storm's coming fast. You got a place for tonight?" Emma's silence was answer enough. "I'll take you to Martha's now," Ethan decided. "She won't turn away a child in a storm." Emma looked down at Tommy, still sleeping soundly, his small hand curled into a fist. Every instinct warned her against trusting a stranger, but what choice did she have? The alternative was unthinkable. "I can pay my own way," she said firmly. "Once I'm working." Ethan's mouth quirked up at one corner. "Never doubted it, madam." He turned to Pearson. "Put a few supplies on my account, Oscar, enough to see them through a couple of days." Before Emma could protest, Ethan had lifted Tommy with surprising gentleness. The boy stirred but didn't wake, instinctively curling against the warmth of Ethan's chest. "My wagon's outside," he said. "Let's get you both somewhere warm before this weather turns." Outside, the sky had darkened to a threatening gray. Ethan's wagon was modest but solid, with a canvas cover to protect against the elements. He settled Tommy in the back, creating a nest of blankets that smelled of horses and pine. "It's not far," he assured Emma as he helped her up. "Martha's place is just past the church." As they pulled away from the store, Emma cast one last glance at the flour sack where her son had been sleeping moments before. The simple kindness of a stranger had altered their course, but whether for better or worse remained to be seen. The ride to Martha Jenkins' boarding house was short but silent, with Emma too proud to express her gratitude and too wary to initiate conversation. Ethan seemed content with the quiet, occasionally glancing back to check on Tommy, who slept on, oblivious to the changes unfolding around him. The boarding house was a 2-story structure with a wide porch and windows glowing with welcoming light. As Ethan pulled the wagon to a stop, the front door opened, revealing a plump woman with silver-streaked hair and an apron dusted with flour. "Ethan Orton, what brings you out in this weather?" Martha called, then noticed Emma and Tommy. Her expression immediately softened. "Oh, you've brought company. Mrs. Jenkins," Ethan said, tipping his hat. "This is Mrs. Sullivan and her boy Tommy. They just arrived in town and need a place to stay." Martha's keen eyes took in Emma's worn appearance and the sleeping child. "Well, don't just sit there in the cold. Bring them inside." Within minutes, Emma found herself seated at a kitchen table larger than any she'd seen, a steaming cup of tea before her and Tommy still sleeping, now on a small settee by the hearth. Martha bustled about, bringing out bread and preserves while Ethan explained the situation in low tones. "So you're looking for work and you can cook and clean?" Martha asked directly once Ethan had finished. "Yes, madam," Emma replied, straightening her spine. "I'm a hard worker. My husband and I ran a small farm in Pennsylvania before." She swallowed hard. "I can do whatever's needed." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "The winter season brings travelers seeking shelter from the pass. I'm not as spry as I once was, and these old bones protest at the stairs." She glanced at Tommy. "The boy's father, pneumonia," Emma said softly, 3 months ago." Martha's face softened with understanding. "My Harold's been gone 7 years now. It gets easier, but it never gets easy." She reached across the table and patted Emma's hand. "Room and board plus $3 a week to start. If it works out, we can discuss more permanent arrangements." Relief washed over Emma like a physical force, making her light-headed. "Thank you, Mrs. Jenkins. We won't be a burden." "Martha, please. And I don't take charity cases, Mrs. Sullivan. I need the help and you need the work. It's a fair exchange." "Emma," she offered with the first genuine smile in months. Martha nodded approvingly, then turned to Ethan. "And you, Mr. Orton, staying for supper? The storm's setting in." Ethan glanced at Emma, something unreadable in his expression. "I should get back to my place, livestock to tend to." "Nonsense," Martha declared. "You can go after the meal. I've got stew that'll stick to your ribs, and you can tell Emma here about Timber Creek while we eat." It wasn't a request, and Ethan seemed to know it. He removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Yes, madam." Dinner was a revelation, rich venison stew with vegetables and dumplings that made Emma realize just how hungry she'd been. Tommy woke just in time to eat, shy at first but warming quickly to Martha, who slipped him an extra biscuit with a conspiratorial wink. Throughout the meal, Emma learned that Ethan Orton ran a modest ranch about 3 miles outside of town. He raised horses primarily, with a small herd of cattle on the side. He'd been in Timber Creek for 6 years, arriving much as she had with nothing but determination and a need to start over. "What brought you west?" Martha asked Emma as she served apple pie that was indeed exceptional. "John, my husband, he had a cousin in Oregon who wrote about the land opportunities," Emma explained. "We sold our farm after 2 bad seasons and decided to try our luck out here." She looked down at her plate. "We never made it that far." "Maybe it's just as well," Ethan said quietly. "Oregon's getting crowded and the best land was claimed years ago. Montana's still got room to breathe." "And good people," Martha added pointedly, giving Ethan a look that Emma couldn't quite interpret. As the evening wore on, Tommy began to droop again, his small head nodding as he fought sleep. Martha showed Emma to a small but clean room at the back of the house, just off the kitchen as Ethan had mentioned. It contained a narrow bed, a trundle that could be pulled out for Tommy, and a small chest of drawers. "It's not much," Martha apologized, "but it's warm and dry." "It's perfect," Emma replied, meaning it. After weeks on the trail and nights spent in the wagon or under the stars, the simple room seemed like luxury. Tommy was already asleep by the time Emma returned to the kitchen to thank Martha and Ethan. The storm had arrived in full force, rain lashing against the windows as wind moaned through the eaves. "You can't go out in this," Martha said to Ethan, hands on her hips. "The north guest room is empty." Ethan looked uncomfortable. "My animals will survive one night," Martha insisted. "I won't have your death on my conscience, Ethan Orton." He relented with a sigh that suggested this was a familiar argument. Just for tonight, then. After Martha retired to her room, Emma found herself alone with Ethan in the kitchen. An awkward silence stretched between them as the storm raged outside. "Thank you," Emma said finally, the words inadequate for what he'd done. "For helping us today." Ethan leaned against the counter, those blue eyes studying her with an intensity that made her both nervous and oddly secure. "No need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Emma disagreed softly. "They wouldn't have." She'd experienced enough of the world's indifference to know the value of kindness. Something in her tone made Ethan's expression shift, revealing a glimpse of vulnerability beneath his composed exterior. "I meant what I said at the store. Someone helped me once when I was at my lowest. A man named Jacob took me in, taught me ranching, gave me a chance when no one else would." "What happened to him?" Emma asked, sensing there was more to the story. "Died 3 years back," Ethan replied, his voice tight. "Left me his place, said I'd earned it." He looked down at his hands, strong and calloused from years of hard work. I figure the best way to honor him is to pass on the same kindness. Emma nodded, understanding completely. Well, Tommy and I are grateful, regardless of your reasons. The mention of her son brought a small smile to Ethan's face. He's a good boy, quiet. He hasn't spoken much since John died, Emma admitted, the worry she carried spilling out unexpectedly. He used to chatter all day long, but now. She shook her head. The doctor in Cheyenne said it's the shock, that he'll come around in his own time. He will, Ethan assured her with a certainty that was comforting. Children are resilient. Another silence fell between them, but this one was more comfortable. Emma found herself studying Ethan when he wasn't looking, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands dwarfed the coffee cup Martha had given him, the slight furrow between his brows when he was thinking. I should check on Tommy, Emma said finally, suddenly aware of how alone they were. Ethan nodded, standing straighter. Of course. Good night, Mrs. Sullivan. Emma, she corrected him. A genuine smile spread across his face, transforming his features. Emma, he repeated, sleep well. That night, as she lay in a real bed for the first time in months, listening to Tommy's steady breathing and the storm battering the house, Emma allowed herself to consider that perhaps, just perhaps, their luck had finally changed. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the storm having passed during the night. Emma woke early, ingrained habits of farm life making it impossible to sleep once the first light appeared. She dressed quickly and slipped out to the kitchen, intending to make herself useful before Martha arose. To her surprise, Ethan was already there, stoking the fire in the stove. Good morning, he said quietly, straightening at her entrance. Hope I didn't wake you. Emma shook her head, suddenly conscious of her rumpled appearance. No, I'm always up with the sun. She moved to the pump at the sink. I thought you'd have left already. About to, he replied, reaching for his hat on the table. Wanted to make sure the fire was going for Martha. Her joints pain her in the cold. The simple consideration touched Emma more than a grander gesture might have. This man noticed people's needs and quietly addressed them without seeking recognition. I appreciate what you did yesterday, she said, feeling the need to say something more before he left. Not just finding us a place, but... She gestured vaguely, unable to articulate exactly what his kindness had meant. Ethan nodded, understanding anyway. You'll do fine here, Emma. Martha's good people and Timber Creek's a decent town. Not perfect, but decent. He moved toward the door, then paused. I'm usually in town on Saturdays for supplies, if you or Tommy need anything. He let the offer hang in the air. Thank you, Emma said simply. After Ethan left, Emma set about preparing breakfast, finding comfort in the familiar routine of cooking. When Martha appeared, she seemed pleasantly surprised to find coffee brewing and biscuits in the oven. You weren't joking about being an early riser, the older woman observed with approval. Ethan get off all right? Yes, just a little while ago. Martha nodded, pouring herself coffee. Good man, that one. Keeps to himself mostly, but always there when someone needs help. She gave Emma a sidelong glance. Never seen him take such an immediate interest in newcomers before, though. Emma felt her cheeks warm. He was just being kind. Martha hummed noncommittally. Well, once your boy's up, I'll show you around the place and we can talk about your duties. The following days fell into a rhythm as Emma learned the workings of the boarding house. Martha had 4 regular boarders, a widowed schoolteacher named Miss Winters, a clerk from the bank named Mr. Hobbs, the young telegraph operator Walter Green, and an elderly prospector called Old Pete who had given up mining but couldn't give up the mountains. In addition to the permanent residents, travelers frequently stopped for a night or two on their way through. The work was steady but manageable, and Emma found herself grateful for the busy days that left her too tired to dwell on grief when night fell. Tommy gradually emerged from his shell, particularly drawn to old Pete, who whittled small animals for him and told heavily edited tales of his prospecting days. The boy still spoke little, but his eyes had begun to regain their spark, and that was enough for Emma. Saturday came, and with it a familiar figure entering the boarding-house kitchen while Emma kneaded bread dough. "Mr. Orton," she said, wiping flour from her hands. "Martha's in town at the Mercantile." "Actually," Ethan said, removing his hat, "I was hoping to speak with you." Emma tensed instinctively. In her experience, men seeking private conversations rarely brought good news. "I've got a proposition," he continued, seemingly unaware of her discomfort. "My foreman's wife just had their third baby, and she's looking for some sewing work she can do from home. I remembered you mentioned you could sew and thought." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "She's written down what she needs: some shirts for her husband, baby things. She'd pay fair." Relief washed through Emma, followed by gratitude. Extra money would help her build a small nest egg, something she desperately needed. "That's very thoughtful," she said. "Please tell her I'd be happy to help." Ethan nodded, looking pleased. "I'll bring the fabric by next time I'm in town." He hesitated, then added, "How's the boy settling in?" "Better every day," Emma smiled. "Old Pete's been telling him stories about finding gold and fighting off bears." "Most of which never happened," Ethan said with a chuckle. "Pete's a good sort, though. Had a daughter once, lost her to fever. Has a soft spot for children." The conversation shifted to town matters, and Emma found herself relaxing in Ethan's presence. He had a quiet way about him, never pushing or rushing his words. When Martha returned, she insisted he stay for lunch, and the three of them ate together while Tommy played on the floor with wooden animals. "Ethan," Martha said suddenly, "don't you need some help with that new filly of yours, the spirited one?" Ethan looked confused. "I've been managing—" "Nonsense," Martha interrupted. "Emma here grew up with horses. Her father raised them in Pennsylvania, isn't that right, dear?" Emma blinked, having mentioned no such thing. She was just telling me how she misses riding," Martha continued, ignoring Emma's bewildered expression. "Might do her good to get out of the house. Sunday's her day off, you know." Understanding dawned on Ethan's face, followed by amusement. "Is that so?" he asked, looking at Emma. Trapped by Martha's blatant matchmaking, Emma could only nod weakly. "Well then," Ethan said, his eyes twinkling, "I would certainly appreciate any help you might offer, Mrs. Sullivan. If you'd like to come out to the ranch tomorrow, that is." Martha beamed triumphantly. "It's settled then." "Emma, I'll watch Tommy for the day. The boy and I can bake cookies." And just like that, Emma found herself committed to spending Sunday at Ethan Orton's ranch, courtesy of Martha Jenkins' transparent scheming. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, with the kind of blue sky that seemed particular to Montana, vast and endless, stretching from horizon to horizon. Emma dressed with unusual care, selecting her best remaining dress, a simple blue calico that had somehow survived the journey relatively intact. Martha was suspiciously ready with a packed lunch and enthusiastic assurances that Tommy would be perfectly fine in her care. The boy himself seemed untroubled by his mother's impending absence, already planning his baking adventure with Martha. Ethan arrived promptly at 9, driving a smaller buggy rather than his wagon. He wore a clean shirt under his usual duster, and Emma suspected he'd made a similar effort with his appearance. "You look nice," he said as he helped her into the buggy, the simple compliment delivered with such sincerity that Emma felt herself flush. "Thank you. It's one of the few decent things I have left." The ride to Ethan's ranch took them through rolling grasslands, just beginning to green with the approach of spring. He pointed out landmarks as they traveled: a creek where the fishing was good, a stand of trees where wild berries grew in summer, the distant mountains that marked the territory's edge. "There it is," he said finally, as they crested a small rise. "Nothing fancy, but it's mine." Ethan's modesty hadn't prepared Emma for the neat, well-maintained property that came into view. The main house was solid and welcoming, with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney. Several outbuildings, including a large barn, stood nearby. A corral held about a dozen horses, and in the distance, cattle grazed on the new grass. "It's lovely," Emma said honestly, taking in the peaceful scene. Ethan's expression softened with pride. "Jacob built most of it. I've added the north pasture and the new barn." As they pulled up to the house, a tall, lean man emerged from the barn. "That's Liam, my foreman," Ethan explained. "Lives in the smaller house beyond those trees with his wife Sarah and their children." Liam approached with a curious expression. "Boss, didn't expect you back so soon." "Liam, this is Mrs. Sullivan," Ethan introduced. "She's new to town, working at Martha's place. Used to raise horses back east and offered to help with Willow." Emma shot Ethan a look at this embellishment of her expertise, but he merely smiled innocently. "Pleasure, madam," Liam said, tipping his hat. "Willow's a handful, all right. Got my thumb near broke trying to bridle her yesterday." After a brief conversation about the day's tasks, Liam returned to work and Ethan led Emma toward the house. "I thought we'd have some coffee before tackling Willow," he suggested. "And I should warn you, I may have exaggerated your horse experience." Emma laughed despite herself. "You think? I rode as a girl, but my father was a carpenter, not a horse breeder." "Martha's doing, not mine," Ethan defended himself with a grin. "But you're here now, and I do have a troublesome filly that needs gentling." The interior of Ethan's home revealed much about the man. It was simple but comfortable, with sturdy furniture and a few unexpected touches, bookshelves filled with volumes ranging from practical manuals to poetry. A piano in one corner, gathering dust but well cared for, and paintings of Montana landscapes that brought the outdoors inside. "It's not much," Ethan said, watching her examine the room, "but it suits me." "It's a real home," Emma replied. "That's no small thing." They had coffee and fresh bread that Ethan admitted Sarah had sent over. "She bakes for me twice a week. Says a man alone will starve otherwise," and talked easily about their lives before Montana. Emma learned that Ethan had grown up in Missouri, the son of a blacksmith. He'd fought briefly in the war despite being young, had drifted afterward, working ranches across the West before meeting Jacob Miller, who'd become like a father to him. In turn, she told him about her childhood in a small Pennsylvania town, her marriage to John at 19, their struggles to make the farm profitable, and finally, their fateful decision to seek a new start in the West. "John was a good man," she said softly. "Not perfect, but good. He deserved better than a roadside grave in Wyoming." Ethan's expression was solemn. "No one deserves that, but you've honored him by carrying on, by taking care of your boy." His understanding, free of platitudes or awkward sympathy, touched Emma deeply. For the first time, she felt truly seen in her grief, not just pitied. Eventually, they made their way to the barn where Willow, a spirited bay filly with one white sock, eyed them suspiciously from her stall. "She's beautiful," Emma breathed, admiring the horse's sleek lines and intelligent eyes. "And she knows it," Ethan replied wryly. "Too smart for her own good. Won't take a saddle without bucking, and she's bitten every hand on the place except mine." For the next few hours, Emma watched and helped as Ethan worked patiently with Willow, demonstrating techniques for gaining the animal's trust. Emma's natural affinity for horses proved useful after all, as she had a gentle touch that seemed to calm the filly. "You have a way with her," Ethan observed, impressed when Willow allowed Emma to stroke her neck. "She's not usually this settled with strangers." Emma smiled, feeling a confidence she hadn't experienced in months. "She just wants to be understood, not dominated." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes at her words. "Most creatures are like that, I suspect." By midday, they'd made good progress with Willow and broke for the lunch Martha had packed. Ethan led Emma to a spot by the creek where a large oak provided shade. The simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold chicken tasted extraordinary in the open air, with the sound of water gurgling over rocks and meadowlarks singing in the distance. "Thank you for today," Emma said as they finished eating. "It's been—" She searched for the right word. "Healing." Ethan looked at her thoughtfully, his blue eyes reflecting the sky above. "You've had a hard road, Emma, but you're stronger than you know." "I don't feel strong," she admitted. "Most days I'm terrified I'll make some mistake that hurts Tommy, that I can't provide for him the way John would have." "Fear doesn't mean you're not strong," Ethan replied. "It just means you care deeply, and from what I've seen, Tommy is lucky to have you." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching clouds drift overhead. Emma couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so at peace, so unburdened by worry, if only temporarily. "I should probably get you back," Ethan said eventually, though he made no move to stand. "Martha will be expecting you." Emma nodded reluctantly. "Yes, I suppose so." As they gathered the remains of their lunch, Ethan's hand brushed against hers, a fleeting touch that sent an unexpected warmth through her fingers. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of possibility. The moment stretched, fragile and significant, until Ethan finally looked away, clearing his throat. "I'd like to see you again," he said simply. "Not just in passing at Martha's." Emma's heart beat a rapid rhythm against her ribs. It had been barely 6 months since John's death. Was it disloyal to feel this tentative attraction? Yet something about Ethan called to her, a steadiness that promised safety in a world that had proven dangerously unpredictable. "I'd like that too," she said quietly, making her decision. "But I need to move slowly, for Tommy's sake and my own." Ethan's smile was understanding. "I've waited 32 years to meet someone like you, Emma Sullivan. I reckon I can be patient a while longer." The ride back to town was filled with conversation that flowed more easily now, as if some invisible barrier had been crossed. They talked about books they'd read, Ethan's plans for the ranch, Emma's hopes to eventually have a place of her own again. When they reached Martha's, Tommy came running out to meet them, his face smeared with cookie dough and more animated than Emma had seen in months. "Mama, I made cookies with stars on them," he announced, the most words he'd spoken at once since his father's death. Emma knelt and embraced him, tears springing to her eyes at this small but significant breakthrough. Over Tommy's shoulder she caught Ethan watching them, his expression soft with something that might have been affection. "Would you like a cookie, Mr. Orton?" Tommy asked shyly, looking up at the tall cowboy. Ethan crouched down to the boy's level. "I'd be honored, Tommy." "Did you save the best one for me?" Tommy nodded solemnly and took Ethan's large hand in his small one, leading him toward the kitchen. Emma followed, her heart full in a way she hadn't thought possible again. Martha, watching from the doorway, gave Emma a knowing smile that said more clearly than words, "I told you so." Spring blossomed into summer, and with it, Emma and Tommy's life in Timber Creek took root and flourished. The boarding house thrived under Martha and Emma's joint care, developing a reputation that brought regular business from travelers along the stage route. Emma's sewing work for Sarah expanded to include commissions from other women in town, providing a modest but growing income beyond her wages. Tommy, responding to the stability and safety of their new life, came fully out of his shell. He started attending the small school in town, made friends with the blacksmith's son, and developed a particular attachment to Ethan, who had become a regular visitor at the boarding house. Ethan kept his promise about taking things slowly. His courtship of Emma was conducted with a patience and consideration that gave her time to reconcile her growing feelings for him with her memories of John. He brought small gifts: wildflowers, a ribbon for her hair, a carved wooden horse for Tommy, and gradually introduced Emma to the community, standing protectively at her side at church socials and town gatherings. In late July, Emma finally accepted Ethan's invitation to attend the town's Independence Day celebration as his official companion. The decision marked a turning point, a public acknowledgement of what many in Timber Creek had already observed developing between them. The day was perfect: clear skies, a gentle breeze, and the entire town gathered in the meadow behind the church for food, games, and an evening of dancing. Tommy ran with the other children, his laughter carrying across the grass to where Emma sat with Ethan on a blanket. "He's happy here," Ethan observed, watching the boy. "You both seem to be." Emma nodded, her heart full. "I never expected to find this again," she said softly. "A place that feels like home." Ethan's hand found hers on the blanket, his calloused fingers entwining with hers in a gesture that had become familiar and precious. "I've been thinking," he began, then hesitated. "A dangerous pastime," Emma teased, earning a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "The south addition to the house is nearly finished," he continued. 3 rooms, a bedroom, a small study, and what could be a fine room for a boy with a view of the horses. Emma's breath caught as she realized what he was saying. "I'm not trying to replace John," Ethan said earnestly. "I know he'll always have a place in your heart, in Tommy's memories, but I hope there might be room for me too." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, worn ring, simple but beautiful, a gold band with a single pearl. "This was my mother's," he explained. "I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right person to give it to." Emma looked from the ring to Ethan's face, seeing there all the steadfast care and growing love he'd shown her and Tommy over the past months. "I don't have fancy words," he continued when she remained silent. "Just a promise to care for you and Tommy, to protect you both, to try every day to deserve the gift of your company." He took a deep breath. "Emma Sullivan, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The world seemed to still around them as Emma considered his words. She thought of John, of the life they'd planned together that had been cut short. She thought of the long, lonely journey west, of Tommy sleeping on a sack of flour in Pearson's store, of Ethan's quiet declaration that first day, "He'll sleep in a bed tonight." Ethan had kept that promise, and everyone since. He'd given them not just shelter but respect, not just kindness but dignity. "Yes," Emma said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, I will marry you, Ethan Orton." His face transformed with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been made for her, and perhaps in some way it had been waiting all these years for this moment. Their kiss was gentle but full of promise, witnessed only by the distant mountains and the summer breeze. Later, as the sun began to set and lanterns were lit for the dancing, Emma called Tommy over. Together, they told him about their plans to become a family. The boy's initial confusion gave way to excitement when he realized he would live on a ranch with horses, and that Ethan, already his hero, would be his new father. "Can I call you Pa?" Tommy asked, looking up at Ethan with serious eyes. Ethan knelt before the boy, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I'd be honored, Tommy, but only when you're ready. Your real Pa was a brave man who loved you very much. I'd never want to take his place, just hope to stand beside his memory." Tommy considered this with a child's directness, then nodded. "I think my pa would like you," he decided. "You're good with horses." A laugh escaped Ethan, half joy and half released tension. "High praise indeed," he said, ruffling Tommy's hair. As the fiddles struck up a lively tune, Ethan led Emma to the dancing area, his hand warm and secure at her waist. "Mrs. Martha Jenkins," Emma said with a knowing smile as they twirled among the other dancers, "is going to be insufferably pleased with herself." Ethan laughed, the sound rich and full. "She's already told me where we should place the cradle." Emma blushed at the implication, but couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her at the thought of expanding their family someday. The wedding took place in October, when the aspens had turned golden, and the first hint of winter crispness touched the air. It was a simple ceremony in the town church, with Martha giving the bride away and Tommy standing proudly beside Ethan, a miniature version of the man in his new suit. The entire town turned out, both for the ceremony and the celebration afterward at Ethan's, now their ranch. Beneath a canopy of trees adorned with lanterns, they danced and feasted, celebrating not just the union of two people but the creation of a family forged through loss, kindness, and gradually blossoming love. That night, after Tommy had fallen asleep in his new room, the window indeed offering a perfect view of the horse pasture, Emma stood on the porch of her new home, watching stars appear in the vast Montana sky. Ethan joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his solid presence a comfort she had come to rely on. "Happy?" he asked, his breath warm against her ear. Emma leaned back against him, the events of the past year flowing through her mind, the desperate grief of burying John, the terrifying uncertainty of continuing westward alone with Tommy, the moment of absolute despair in Pearson's store, and then Ethan. His simple, life-changing declaration about a bed for Tommy that had been about so much more than furniture. "More than I thought possible again," she answered honestly. "You gave us shelter when we needed it most, but more than that, you gave us hope." Ethan turned her in his arms, his expression serious in the moonlight. "You've given me just as much, Emma, a purpose beyond work, a family when I thought I'd always be alone." He touched her cheek gently. "I promise you, as long as I live, you and Tommy will never sleep anywhere but in a proper bed, in a proper home, safe and cared for." "I know," Emma whispered, reaching up to touch his beloved face. "That's why I love you." Their kiss sealed the promise between them, witnessed by the Montana stars and the whisper of wind through the pines, a new beginning born from chance, kindness, and the courage to open their hearts again. 1 year later, in that same bedroom with the view of the horses, Emma gave birth to a daughter they named Grace Martha Orton. Tommy, now 6 and thriving, proudly helped Ethan build a cradle that sat beside their bed just where Martha had predicted it should go. And as Emma rocked her daughter to sleep while Ethan read Tommy a bedtime story, she thought back to that desperate day in Pearson's store, her son sleeping on a sack of flour, and marveled at how a single act of kindness had changed the course of their lives forever. The flour sack that had once been Tommy's bed now held a place of honor, transformed by Emma's skilled hands into a quilt for Grace's cradle, a reminder that sometimes the end of one journey is merely the beginning of a far greater one.